Just want to welcome you all to the 3rd through 7th grade Q&A panel session. Really excited to have you here for those that are here and those that are watching this on recording. Thank you for sending your questions in, and we'll get a Google Doc of all the questions and our responses out to you when we send out the recording. So let's get started. I'll introduce the panelists. We are missing a couple panelists at the moment, but I'm hoping that they're going to jump in here as we get started. So why are we doing this? We are doing this because we want to give back to the homeschooling community. There are so many new homeschoolers, but even homeschoolers who are just continuing on need answers for a new season and encouragement for a new season. K through 2nd is kind of its own animal, then maybe 3rd through 5th, and then 6th through 8th. So we've done a panel discussion for K through 2nd already, and this one's focusing on 3rd through 7th. We didn't think that there was that much different. There's some things that are different as you get older, but 3rd through 7th is kind of a good chunk, and then 8th through high school, we're doing another session actually right after this one for them. But we've been in your shoes in terms of homeschooling these grade levels, right? Not during COVID though, so that brings up something new that we did not face. Two of the panelists are actually all the panelists, the two that are on right now and the two that are hoping to join, are still homeschooling. So they currently homeschool, and so they are doing it during COVID, so they can talk to that, but they're new to COVID just like everybody. And we're passing this on, we're paying it forward. Other people, we checked in with other people and we've learned from other people along the way. So we're just hoping to lighten your load and relieve some of the pressure that can come through just going into a new year or going into homeschooling fresh. So I'm Kathleen Rumford, I'm the session moderator. Real quick about me, I homeschooled 2 daughters from 2000 to 2014. When I first heard of homeschooling, I didn't even know it was legal. But when my older daughter was in 2nd grade, public school, I just really felt led to bring her home and try out homeschooling, at least for a year. And then that continued year after year. And then finally, I'm like, okay, no, we're really going to do this homeschooling. I'm not doing the year after year. Are we going to do this? Are we going to do this? Finally, I was like, yeah, we are doing this. It's really worked well for us. And in 2nd grade, I thought, oh my gosh, can I do this? Well, of course, you can teach 2nd grade. So year after year, it just was really, really the most rewarding time of my life. I am a software engineer, so I had 8 years of working in software engineer project management prior to that, but staying home with the kids and homeschooling them really was the most rewarding experience for me. My girls, I took them through high school, dual enrollment, and then one now has her master's in Spanish sociolinguistics, and the younger one, who actually did struggle through school, she's more of a creative, she had a mild processing delay. She graduated with her bachelor's in creative advertising and business last year, and they both own their own businesses. I continue to support the homeschooling community through a high school personal finance class that I started teaching in 2010, and 2 Facebook groups, Homeschool High School Support Group and Katalytic Kids, which seeks to help parents empower kids towards godly character through financial literacy, contentment, and a strong work ethic. So that's just a little bit about me. And let me introduce our panelists. Now, this was my idea, but I could not do this myself. It's been a while since I've homeschooled this age group, and I'm just really, really grateful for our panelists. As I mentioned, we've got 2 on right now. Oops. Yes, actually, the 2 panelists who aren't here are Kimberly and Christine, so hopefully they'll join us. Just in case they do, let me just quick tell you a little bit about them. Kimberly's been homeschooling for 21 years. 3 through college, 1's in law school right now. She still has a junior in high school that she's homeschooling and a 4th grader that she's homeschooling. And the 4th grader has severe learning disabilities, dyslexia, and ADD. She never meant to teach. It was never her thought that she'd be doing this. Her husband asked her to try it, and she found out that homeschooling is different than schooling at home. And she is learning alongside her kids and tutoring them toward a love of learning, not just about teaching required subjects. And God has really helped her through this and built a great bond within her family. And Christine, who unfortunately had to take her daughter to the doctor, maybe with strep this morning, but might be able to join in. She's been homeschooling over 20 years. She's got 3 boys graduated from high school, 1 son still at Potomac Falls, and also a 5th grade daughter she's high schooling. So the boys who she's graduated already, 2 got Ivy League admissions, multiple Service Academy admissions, ROTC scholarships, NCAA D1 athletic scholarship, and 1 son went straight from high school into a professional apprenticeship. So college is not necessarily the only path right? So that's Kimberly and Christine in case they're able to join us. And we do have Rhonda and Renee on with us. So let me introduce them. Let me move my screen down a little bit. All right, so Rhonda and her husband never intended to become homeschoolers, but they decided to try it 11 years ago when the oldest encountered a terrible first grade public school teacher. So after withdrawing her son halfway through the year to temporarily homeschool him, they discovered that he learned faster and they were all much happier. So building on that successful start, she continued homeschooling all three kids through middle school, and currently the two older are attending public high school, one in a junior ROTC program and the other in a specialized IT program. And the youngest is in 8th grade and still homeschooling. So in addition to homeschooling, Rhonda works part-time as a family medicine physician and coaches a local field hockey club. So thank you, Rhonda. Let me see if I can get Rhonda and Renee up here on our, there we go. Okay, so thank you, Rhonda, for being here. Really appreciate that. And Renee Self Henderson. Renee was homeschooled from 7th grade through 12th grade, and she married a man who also homeschooled through high school. They have 4 children who have been homeschooling since the oldest was 4, which was the same year that her youngest was born. So it made it very full hands and much multitasking, especially during that year, but even subsequent years, I'm sure. Her kids are now 13, 12, 10, and 8. In addition to homeschooling, Renee works as a dance teacher and as an attendant to children with special needs. Renee believes that the opportunity to homeschool blesses her with one of the most challenging and rewarding jobs in the world. Definitely. So thank you so much, Renee, for being here as well. Okay, so again, without the panelists, we wouldn't have this, so I thank them for being here. And these are the topics that we've kind of, from what you all sent in and some other things we were thinking about, the topics that we came up with to talk about today. We have an hour and now we have about 45 minutes. So let's just jump right into this. The most and least important for homeschooling, the 3rd through 5th and the really middle school years. And, you know, Rhonda, would you mind just kicking us off on that? What your thoughts are on that?
Sure. Glad to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
Yes.
That's a great question. What's most important? What's least important? So I like answering this question. For me, the way I see it, the most important, I kind of have 3 categories. Most important, math, reading, writing. Reading, writing, and arithmetic. I think that's still today most important. So that's always been our first priority. Math, find a good program, working through it consistently is what you need to do, especially memorize. It's for the younger kids, memorizing their math facts. That's a big deal. I think our school system at least has kind of jettisoned that, but that's a really good foundation for math. Try to, if you need to switch math programs, do it if you need to, but try to avoid like jumping from one program to another, just working through math consistently. It's a skill-based subject, and you need to learn it systematically. So number 1, math, and then reading, obviously, especially for the younger kids, reading, and then as they get older, literature, and then writing, composition, grammar, all those things that they call language arts. So, your vocabulary, penmanship, spelling, composition, grammar. So that kind of goes in for me, like the writing category. So we always used to, I don't know, you could do your schedule any way you like. We used to start with math and in our composition, our writing, and just make grammar, make sure we got that done, because I felt like that was the most important foundation for their lives. And then my second area would be science and history. And those are a little different, I think, in my mind, just because those are more content-based subjects. You can't learn all of science, from 3rd to 7th. You can't learn all of history from 3rd to 7th, but, what exposure you can give to your kids is helpful for them, especially when, it's building up, to prepare for high school. High school, they should have systematic history courses, systematic science courses. So if there is something they missed, they should be covering that in high school. But, the more exposure you can give them when they're younger is just helpful. History is a lot of fun for younger kids, especially there's a lot of great homeschool programs that are great for history. Stories, sit on the couch and read all the stories, and lots of kids love the history, when they're younger. with history, we always teach geography, map skills. So don't forget that. For science, I know just from experience, a lot of homeschoolers aren't good at teaching science. I'm in the science field and I have trouble teaching science, but I would just encourage you to do a good science program. Don't skip it. You know, a lot of times people kind of get to the end of the day, we're too tired and I can't do a science experiment, skip it. You know, don't skip science. Science is really important. If you're not good at teaching it, find a good program. There's some good ones out there. Ones I've used, for example, Mystery Science is an online science program for elementary school kids. That's great. And then BJU just is another program that's really solid for science. So there's good science. So don't skip science. So that's the second category. And then like kind of I look at it as a third category of, you know, some of the electives. If you have time to fit some things that you're interested in, you know, obviously like art, music are good to have. Foreign language is good if you can fit that in. Computer science, you know, I have a child who's going to go into computer science and she loves it. So we did a computer science elective every year. I have another child who's really into business, so we're doing a business elective with her. There's speech and debate and public speaking. It's a little hard this year, but that's something to think about. And then as kids get older, logic, the argumentation, logical fallacies, those kinds of things. So you can think of electives sort of as your third thing to put in. That's good. Younger kids, I would definitely, like the 3 through 5, keep it basic on your focus. As they get older, you can do more hours of school, get into more logic and analysis rather than just learning facts, like as when they're younger. You can also, you know, find their special interest and trying to personalize your school toward, you know, even accelerating in certain areas that they're interested in. So that's my take on what's most important.
Great. Yeah. Thank you so much for going down that in that orderly fashion. That was really helpful. Renee, did you have anything that you wanted to add here?
I also was just thinking about how not only are academics really important in these years, but they're really formative years. So if you have a religion or worldview or character trait kind of stuff you want to impart in your kids, this is a wonderful time to focus on that. They don't have to be quite as stressed about getting in an exact number of credits as they will in high school. So this is a good opportunity to be able to take a little more time, and they might still be at an age where they listen to mom a little more than when they're slightly older. So I would say that as well. And sometimes transitioning for some kids can be harder. It might depend on what they did when they were younger. So I think as they get further along in middle school, really preparing them to be more independent in high school is important. And for some kids, that's very hard. We started a class last year where there was note-taking and highlighting and answering questions in a way that my middle schoolers had not done before. And for us, it was important for me to slow down and not just expect them to be able to just suddenly know how to do that, but model it. So I sat side by side with them, and for the first couple weeks, highlighted what I would highlight, and then wrote notes, and they just copied. And then the next week, maybe I highlighted, but I didn't write the notes, and then they came up with their own notes. So you kind of want them to be ready to do that when they're in high school. So if you can take this time to give them maybe one subject at least that's more challenging or more like they will do when they're in high school, and then identify what challenges they may have so that you can work through that with them. Again, while it doesn't really matter quite as much because they're not looking at this stuff going on to a high school transcript or GPA.
Great. That brings up some great points also. And for me as well, you know, during these years, you want to continue that love of learning. You know, and as they go further into the 7th, 8th, the middle school, the high school, I don't want to say the love of learning should stop, but hopefully you've made those earlier years, you know, with just so much reading, so many stories, just great time of bonding where they're learning, but it's not so rigorous or systematic necessarily, or schedule driven. I am a schedule person. I definitely did have schedules and stuff, but if you can keep it just so that they're developing a love of learning, the science, like Rhonda was saying, make it fun. I mean, you can do, the science part can be really fun. Science is not my forte either. And at the time we did do a lot of science co-ops. That's how we did our science. We did a lot of science co-ops, and I know that that's not as probable now, although maybe people are still doing that. We just did a ton of reading with our history. We integrated our history. We used Story of the World, and that was a 4-year cycle through the ancients and the Middle Ages, Renaissance, up to present day. So it was 4 different years to do all that, and then we repeated it, but at a higher level, depending on the grade. And we integrated new books, and we just loved it. So we had so much great reading. I'm just looking at my notes here. If your child likes business, like Rhonda was saying, you could have them start a business, right? So you're taking business kind of classes perhaps, or extracurriculars, but then they're also starting a business, which I'm sure she's doing with her child, or has done with her child. And my kids did that as well. We did a lot of entrepreneurial stuff. And then, as Renee was saying, the character development. We did a lot of character development during that 3rd through 7th grade, because this is the time where they are more moldable. They still, mom is still, someone hopefully that they're having a great relationship with. Things do transition a little bit when they're turning 12, 13, 14, 15. They're breaking away more. And although they may still have a good relationship with you, it's different. So I really feel like these are the moldable years. Something that we did with our kids was we called it our bucket saving system. It was a chore allowance, strong work ethic, responsibility, accountability, empowering, and giving them confidence in not just how to manage finances. And they had different buckets, they had different savings goals. They ended up having to pay for some of their own college. They had to buy their own car. So all of this we started at age 6, 7 and went through high school. And it taught so much wonderful things, like what opportunity costs. Like if I buy something here, I can't spend it on this, and this is a savings goal, so I have to know short-term gratification versus long-term gratification. But feeling really successful when they've met a goal, and we looped the entrepreneurship in here, strong work ethic, contentment, things like that. Amazing program that we did, that I created for them and that we've done. So it is an opportunity to use these years really wisely and continue just pouring into them that love of learning and some new things that they would gravitate to because it's of interest to them. Yes, you definitely have to do your math. You definitely have to do your language arts. There's certain things you have to do, but there's a lot that you can do around that as well. So, all right, let's move on to the next topic. And we kind of maybe even touched on some of these things, but this one we haven't. So returning to public school, temporary versus permanent. Rhonda, I think you were going to talk about that as well because of this time right now. I think people are unsure if this is just for the year. Maybe if they like it, they'll continue it. That is kind of how I started, not because of COVID, but let's just try this for a year and then let's see where we go. But Rhonda, if you would talk to that a little bit, that'd be great.
Sure. Yeah. And I think this is another great question, especially right now, because there are a lot of people who are sort of the emergency or crisis homeschoolers. We're all homeschoolers right now. So, and they didn't expect themselves to be in this position, and they don't really plan to be on this position for long term. So I think making plans to figure out what do I need to do this year, and then to prepare for what you may be doing in the future, that's a really good idea. So I think it's a little different for the younger kids in elementary school. It's very pretty easy to take them out of school and when they're younger, homeschool them for a year or two, and then transition them back into school for elementary. It's really not hard. I think as long as you do a good quality teaching at home, they should be prepared to go back in. I think if you just plan to do this for 1 year, I would look into your own school where you think they're going to go back to and see if you can find out what they're covering this year, especially in something like science or history. Are they doing Jamestown, or what are they doing? So maybe you want to do similar things this year in your school so they'd be on track with their class when they re-enter. And sometimes it's hard to find that out from your school, but you can all talk to other students who are currently students there, finding out what they're doing. I've done that, and then say, oh, they're doing civics this year. Well, maybe I'll do civics this year too, because my kids are going to join them next year. Yeah, all three of my kids have done homeschooling and then transitioned back to the public school. So I do personally keep track of what the public school is doing and try to stay a little bit on track with them. It's a much bigger issue for if your middle schoolers taking classes for high school credit and you want them to go to public high school and you want that public high school to accept those credits. That's a bigger question. And you again check with your school system, what do they accept, because they're sometimes very particular about what they accept for credits. So our county, I think, has programs, and at least in the past they've listed certain programs that they accept as accredited. Like if I did Algebra 1 through a certain online program, they would accept that. There's also, my kids have done part-time classes with the local middle school in my neighborhood. So they were homeschooled for most of it, and they took Algebra 1 and a foreign language at the middle school, so as part-time students. And that worked because they got credits for those high school courses in the public school system. So it was no issue at all when they went to high school. They already had those credits in the system. You could meet with a school counselor in the high school and say, how do I get my credits accepted? That's oftentimes an individual process with that counselor, that school. There's another way, I think Christine listed on the document, that you can have your transcript accredited and they legally have to accept it. I think just as a general rule, I would try to have a very positive relationship with your school. If possible, a very friendly and positive, and try to do what they accept if you want to have a good relationship with them. And if that makes sense, instead of being an adversarial relationship, like you have to take my credits, try not to be in that adversarial position, because I think it's just a good relationship to have. I did have a good relationship with your school for you and your students. So that's kind of my take on that.
Thank you, Rhonda. Christine did, in that Google Doc, she did include a link to this program or this company in Maine that she got her transcript accredited for the courses for that particular time frame to transition someone back. I think that was back into a high school. As Rhonda said, getting kids back into elementary, maybe even middle, is not as hard, but trying to get some high school stuff accredited can be a little more challenging. And Christine said she's done it, and so she included the link to the company. She said it's very similar, that if you've got if you're coming from California and your child's, an 8th grader or a 9th grader, and they're transitioning to the high school, that the high school can't say, no, you have to start back at 9th grade. So by having an accredited transcript through this company, she was able to get her son into high school. I don't know if she did it in 9th grade, 10th grade or what, but into the public school. So thank you for that information. And just to go back to this topic, just returning to public school or part-time, temporary versus permanent. I think, I experienced this. I think Rhonda said she experienced this. I know Kimberly experienced this. I did not go into homeschooling thinking I was going to be a homeschooler for 15 years. I did not go into it like that. I went into it thinking I was going to do it 1 year. I was taking my daughter out of school for a particular reason, or a couple reasons, and then see how it went. And my mother-in-law was not happy about it. My husband wasn't really totally on board, although he was allowing it. And then by the end of the year, they both saw the difference. My daughter was much more loving. She was happier, and we decided we would continue. Again, we would continue for a year. We weren't necessarily in it for the long haul, but we did do it for the long haul. It was challenging for my daughter when we did take her out in 2nd grade. So she went to public kindergarten, 1st grade, and in 2nd grade, she felt like she was being punished when she was home. We got involved in co-ops. That really helped. I did have her write down a pro and con list. What was pro about homeschooling, con about homeschooling, pro or con about public school. And then when she did that exercise, she actually realized that she was making more of it than she really needed to. And we did get her integrated with community, so homeschooling, there's a lot of homeschool field trips. I mean, a huge community of homeschoolers in this area and even around the country. So it did work out really well, and it ended up being fabulous. In fact, she's now has a daughter of her own, and she wants to homeschool her. So one thing I wanted to jump back to for that first part, transitioning from a little kid to an independent, having ownership responsibility. Rhonda and Renee, was there anything that you did with your kids from a, transitioning from a K through second, now taking a little more ownership for things maybe in the household or things like that you can talk to? Because I think this is a great years for forming that too, as Renee, you were saying about character development. What kinds of things did you do?
Yeah, definitely as they get older, you want to teach them study skills and to do things more independently. I did things like I made them a checklist, and then they could decide what order they wanted to do their work, and give them more control over their schedule. And then, I also put them in one class, in middle school, I put them in a class that was a textbook-based class, so they would learn how to study. And I think Renee was saying this, how to learn how to study, take notes, study a lot of details, spit it out for a test, because that's something they're going to have to do when they're older. It's not as fun, but it's a good skill to have. Renee, do you want to jump in on that too?
Also, like you were saying, as far as like chores and just other things around the house, being more independent as well, starting to do more of the food prep for themselves, their lunches. I mean, that's a great time. You're homeschooling. They're home at lunchtime, and they don't already have a sack lunch probably ready for them, or a hot lunch at the cafeteria. So whether it's teaching them how to cook or just giving them instructions on how to make sandwiches, or giving them options for here's what we have in the house, and they get to choose that each day for themselves, whether it's breakfast or lunch. Those are great things you can do. Chores, just assigning them more responsibilities. Some people do specific chores, some people do, each kid becomes an expert in a particular chore, some rotate through chores, some do, here's a list of chores, you have to pick one each day. And then also, like you were saying, financially, if you can provide them with some way to get or earn money, allowance or something, so that then you can walk them through the value of money and prioritizing things.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, here's one little story. My daughter went down to a friend's house. She was probably maybe 11, 12, just down the street. And her friend said, oh, hey, are you hungry? You want some mac and cheese? And my daughter's like, sure. So she's like, Mom, can you make us macaroni and cheese? And my daughter was like aghast, because she's like, what? Why are you calling your mother to make macaroni and cheese? Like, let's just go make it. And she's like, oh, no, that's what my mom does. And my daughter was like, Mom, we didn't go and make it ourselves. Like, I couldn't believe that. So she knew how to cook, macaroni and cheese and a number of things. But when she came out of public school, I said at second grade, she was so excited to set our island up in our kitchen as the cafeteria. So she wanted to kind of mimic, right? So eventually we didn't do that anymore, but she was so excited. So she made little cards, like there was some kind of card that they had when they went through the cafeteria line, to pay for their whatever. So she made it, set it up like a little cafeteria, and she was so excited. So she took ownership of making lunch and setting this up. She had a sign. She was so excited. And then she would stand behind the counter. So there's just fun things that you can do. Yes, we did do chores every day, and I got my kids up in the morning. We did Bible study, quiet time for 15 minutes, just kind of a soft, gentle opening to the day. Then we each did a 15-ish minute chore, age appropriate, and then breakfast, and then we started academics. But we definitely did things, and responsibility did step up. And eventually I would have my older daughter, who's almost 4 years older than the younger one, teach the younger one the chore that she was now going to transition to, that my older daughter was transitioning out of, and my older daughter was going to take something else on. So we definitely did a lot of that. And I'm not going to tell you our house was always clean. It was hard because we're always home. It was certainly not clean all at once, but every day we did do something. And then on Saturday, we probably did a little more. I took on most of it, but every day during the week, the kids did have chores, and we did tie payment to it. We did kind of more of like a salary, and we have a whole program about that I can share with you. So if we want to just jump into curriculum, I know Rhonda, you were going to just talk about this a little bit, curriculum and learning styles.
Sure, I'll jump in with curriculum. And, you know, and if you're just beginning, a lot of the way probably we all did was just to start with curriculum. You could buy a program, so there are a lot up for sale. There's a whole lot of available. You could buy a whole grade, so you can, you know, if you're doing 5th grade, you can buy the 5th grade box or the sign up for the 5th grade online school. That's easy. Someone has already researched it for you, what they need to know for that grade, and already put a program together and a schedule, and you kind of just start with day one and work through it day by day. As long as you're consistent, you should be able to do, you know, a good quality school. So that's easy. That's good if you're temporarily here for homeschooling and don't plan to stay long. That could be definitely a good option, especially this year when, you know, here we are right before school and you don't have a lot of time to research, and you just need something good. And so I think that could be a very good alternative, especially to public school virtual learning, which, you know, they are not good at this. They have no experience with this. And so, you know, buying a program that's established could be a lot better option academically than doing public school this year. So that's number one. That's an option, and we can go through specific programs that are available, you know, later. But the other option that sometimes a lot of people start with the box or the online thing, and they like some of it and they don't like other parts of it, and they say, I think I could put something better together myself. And so they use the parts they like and they keep those, and they research and they buy other subjects from other companies that they really like, and they make up this personalized plan for their kids, which I think is ends up being the best thing if you have time and the best, you know, time to invest in it and you can research it. It's a great thing to do. So definitely harder to put it together to yourself, but oftentimes better, and you're happier and your kids are happier. You know, so as far as, you know, all-in-one, if you want to buy all-in-one, there are some good online programs, like for example, K-12 is free. It's a public school online. If you just want to do public school online, K-12 is available. There's other ones you have to purchase. Calvert is one, Alpha Omega is another one, Time for Learning. Those are all online based. If you're looking for like a boxed curriculum, Sunlight is very popular. Memoria Press is another one, and Timberdoodle. I've never used those, but I've been recommended by other people who have a lot of experience with these. So that's a good place to start. If you want to do your own research, a great site to begin with is Kathy Duffy has a website. And if you just want to get an overview of the most popular programs and what they're like, that gives you an overview. If you want kind of more opinions on real life experience, I've used the Well-Trained Mind forums. It's an online forum. You can just read and search and ask questions. You know, what do you think about Sunlight, or what do you think about Rod and Staff English, or, you know, and then people give you their opinions on, oh, I hated it or I loved it. That's a great resource. A ton of stuff in there. If you want to say, I'm doing 4th grade, what are you doing for 4th grade? People list, you know, there's whole threads on 4th grade, and they'll list all their programs and what they're doing for 4th grade, and you'll get a whole lot of ideas. So it's a great source. And then the last one I wanted to mention was, there's, I don't know if you've heard of, there's books called, you know, What Your 3rd Grader Needs to Know, which 4th grade, they have a whole series through 8th grade. It's also online for free, called the K-8 Sequence by Hirsch. And so that gives you, you know, if you're going to do it yourself, what do they need to know in 4th grade? Or what do they need to know in 5th grade? You know, it just gives you an idea, especially with the math and the language arts. What do I need to cover? So it just kind of gives you a big picture of, you know, what do I need to cover this year? And that really helped me just to have, I'm not a professional teacher. I don't have a teaching degree, but I wanted to just know, you know, in general, what are my goals for this year in these subjects? And that kind of helps you pick which programs you're going to do. So this is the best stuff I've found in the last 11 years. And I'm sure you guys have lots of more to add to that. So I'll let you guys chime in.
Well,
Yeah,
thanks, Kimberly.
Classical Academic Press is another one to check out. They have been a growing curriculum producer in recent years, and I have loved everything they produce so far. I have switched a lot of my curriculum over to that. They produce a lot of things that are very user-friendly. There's no prior preparation, which you can just sit down with a book and go through the lessons, which I love that part. It's very classical focused, but like I reiterate what Rhonda said. I think looking at a lot of these catalogs, looking online on their online catalogs to see where your child will fit into these curriculums, into what they have, what they're teaching at particular age groups, is a great way for you to get started figuring out what you want to use. Another one that I use is Tapestry of Grace. It's kind of an integrated history, government, literature, and it brings all those pieces together, which I love, teaching sort of that classical mindset in, I know Rhonda mentioned the well-trained mind, which is kind of where I started with everything, but you can integrate topics and integrate your curriculum so everything kind of flows together. You're not spending an hour on language arts, an hour on math. Well, you do have to spend an hour on math, but not spending an hour on history, an hour on science, an hour, separating all these different topics. Think about how you can integrate your topics. So you're sort of knocking out two subjects at one time. You can read living history books, which are accomplishing your literature at the same time of accomplishing your history study, which is great. There's a lot of ways to do that. Curriculums like Tapestry of Grace does a great job at that. But yeah, you listed a lot of great ones, Rhonda.
Great, thank you. Anybody else want to chime in on this, curriculums, and especially if you're not just if you're starting out or continuing, just this age level, 4th through 5th, 6th through 8th kind of thing. And thank you. I think Kimberly just joined us, and I did intro you at the beginning, and Christine has also joined us. So I did intro both of you at the beginning, hoping that you would be on. So thank you for being here. Well, let's just jump into teaching to love learning, because even that it's just all these kind of things are all integrated as well. So Kimberly, you were going to touch on that.
Yeah, I think that goes along with what I was just saying, is that if you get excited about teaching your children, I think Rhonda said she's not a professional teacher. I'm not a professional teacher. This was not my intent was ever to school my kids. I was not a teacher by training or by nature, and but here I have been doing it for 21 years. And so just to give you encouragement that you don't have to be a teacher, you don't have to be even inclined that way, and you can actually do a really good job at educating your children. You are actually equipped to do this. So I think the key is getting excited about teaching your children by learning to love learning yourself. When you begin getting excited about learning the topics that you're excited about learning about, you will actually guide your kids into that same love of learning. What I do at the beginning of the year is I sit down with my elementary students. With planning for my elementary students is to sit down and say all the different things I would love for them to learn about, whether it be a topic or a subject, or it's not something that I necessarily will even cover for an entire year, but just to touch on, or topics that they are interested in learning about, that their natural inclinations or their natural interests lie. And I just kind of write all those things down. I begin to then organize them. I kind of start to think, okay, what could we do for this? What could we talk about? What ways could I integrate Spanish into my 4th graders' lessons this year? What would be something, of course, with his learning disabilities, he's not reading strongly, so reading and doing a visual study of Spanish is not going to work so well for him, but we could do an auditory study of Spanish, and start learning about the culture. And we have infinite resources out there with the internet and YouTube. There's so many different videos about anything you want to learn about. My son just yesterday wanted to learn about how to make a crossbow out of pencils, and so we did some research and learning how to do that. He sit there and followed the instructions on about how to make a crossbow. So I think you just get excited about what you want to learn about, what you want to teach, what you think they ought to learn about. You can teach them that they will actually capture your excitement and your love of learning, and teaching them to love learning is really what this is all about. It's not about getting all this information into their head and going through every subject and checking off every lesson. Although I do find that I get into that routine and I start finding that I'm checking off the topics. But when we just sit down and read a literature book together, right now we're reading the Penderwick series, and my kids every day are, Mommy, are we going to read today? So that's what we're doing through the summer. They get excited about the literature book that we're going to read. So we, make time to do that every day. So anyway, I think that this age group, this 3rd grade to 7th grade, is really essential for, especially if you're going to continue on, but even just for anyone, even if they're going to go back to the public school system at some point, teaching that love of learning is going to change their life and the way they look at learning from now on.
Yeah, and one thing that you had mentioned in the K through 2nd one was with this Penderwick series or any of the books, your older kids, right, come in and say, please don't read that until I get home, right?
Right. Well, that's my junior high school, my 16-year-old daughter just said, hey, Mom, what are we going to read today? Because she knew I had this panel. And I said, okay, we'll make sure we'll fit it in. So I squeezed in a little bit this morning, and then we're going to finish the chapter. But yeah, the older kids, even my sons, when they come home from college and I'm reading to my younger children and they're home on break, they'll actually come, I'll find them coming and sitting on the arm of the chair next to us or on the end of the sofa, just because they want to hear being read to. So reading aloud to them is so important. Reading. We spend probably an hour to 2 hours every day doing read aloud. And that could be not just literature books, it could be history, it could be science, it could be, we can cover so many topics by reading aloud, and our kids, and then doing a narration back when you ask them, okay, now what do you think about that? Or narrate back to me what I just told you, or what happened in the story just now. Those kind of engaging moments are really simple to do, but a very important part of learning, for them learning to educate themselves. And to absorb and digest the material that you're going over, because you could just read and read and read, but if they're not actually digesting it at a point where they can actually narrate that back to you, that you're missing a piece of the education part that's really crucial. So I wanted to add that as well.
Yeah, and that goes back to something that Renee said, where this is a good time to start modeling. And so, for example, with the narration, because we did this with my younger daughter especially, who was more of the creative, more had a little bit of a processing delay. We did some narration back until she was good at that, right? Until she had success at that. And then as we were transitioning over to her, like actually doing the writing, it made more sense to her. So when your child is struggling, for example, with writing, if they're in the 3rd, 4th, 5th age group, there's not as much pressure on you regarding this. Just keep modeling the things that you can model to get them to the point where they're confident, they feel like they have a voice, that what they have to say is important, that what they have to say is interesting, and have them just say, what do you think is important and interesting about this? And doing a lot of the narration back. I did teach writing. We used the Institute for Excellence in Writing for years and years and years. And I would even tell parents, because I was teaching this at our Hearts Homeschool group, if your child's not able to do the writing, I don't mean physical writing, but that is an issue as well sometimes, but just can't get pen to paper, continue working with them. I, as the teacher, am not, as their outside teacher, am not going to say, no, your parents, please don't get involved. You're still the homeschool teacher. You still want to educate your kids. You still want them to be successful. So do not feel like you cannot get involved. It's okay if you're helping them, like you brainstorm ideas. Absolutely. I want you to teach them this now in 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th, so that when they're in the high school time and they may not have you to do that, or maybe they're not allowed to have you to do that, that they know how to do it. So continue modeling all that, whatever it may be. and coming alongside them when they're struggling. You want them to feel successful. You want them to feel confident. This is not, again, just about checking off the boxes. That's not the goal, right? The goal is for them to learn, to be educated, to love learning, and have the skills to take them forward into high school, college, if they go to college, adult life, that kind of thing. So, and then back to the books, what Kimberly was talking about, where high schoolers would come in. We did that, and what happens is I was reading to my kids even in high school, doing some read alouds. Now, they could read probably most of these things, but it creates this environment of family bonding and a comfort and a security. So with her daughter wanting to come in and listen to whatever the Penderwork series they're reading right now, it's not necessarily just the books, it's the feeling. If you're starting all this reading young, it's that feeling, I'm getting goosebumps, that is just amazing. So I won't belabor that point, but that's just something I wanted to mention. Christine, I know you might want to talk about love of learning before we jump into some of this other stuff.
I made a big mistake with this love of learning thing that I think is really valuable to take from. My third son is going to be a luthier. That's a fancy name for a guitar builder. And he's also doing a lot of recording. Starting in this middle school age, we always took piano lessons, but his interest in music went off the charts. Every free minute he had, he was devoting to the point that he took the dictionary out and started memorizing the dictionary so that he could write rap music. Okay. I thought this was a ferocious waste of time, and it frustrated me to no end. That was, in hindsight, obviously a huge mistake. Up until we hit maybe 7th or 8th grade, and then depending on what you see in your child, things like music, art, history, science, we used to go to the library and I would make them, they could take out books they liked, but I would also make them pick books in science. That was how we did those subjects. And that's incredibly child-directed learning, and there's nothing wrong with that. And as I've said before, one of my boys is a biomedical engineer. That obviously is enough science foundation to prepare him to go on in high school and junior high. So don't be afraid of child-directed learning, especially in the lower and upper elementary school years. And if you see your child dive into something and they're absolutely insatiable, go with it. It's not a waste of time. I just had never understood that music could be a career, but pay attention to what lights them up and don't be afraid to go with it. So it was a big mistake for me. I just thought that's not something you do seriously. Well, it is something he's going to do seriously, and he's actually doing a really good job with it. And he is mostly self-taught. And he is one of the boys I have who did transition into high school. He went into high school in his junior year, specifically because our local high school has one of the best guitar programs in the country. And he had to audition, and he placed in. I was stunned. He's never had a lesson. Now he's getting lessons. We're picking up, where we dropped the ball. But pay attention to what drives them. That doesn't mean he didn't have to do math. He still had to do math. But because you're homeschooling, you can shift the percentage of time. He did not devote the same amount of time to math that my bioengineer did. It was a waste of time for him. He still can do math. He's still accepted at college, all of that. But don't be afraid to shift the portion of time to what their passions and their giftedness is, for what it's worth. Do we want to hit the scheduling? Because I think that's a big deal. 2nd and 3rd grade. Can we do that?
We can spend maybe 5 more minutes.
Okay. You should be educating that 2nd and 3rd grader together as much as possible, with the exception of probably math and language arts, grammar. They probably ought not to be in, unless some are, but that would be where I would see them not in the same, probably in the same boat. But I did employ my older children to read aloud to my younger children frequently. And a lot of that time, I would use your 3rd grader to read aloud to the second grader, those should be books below his comfortable reading level, because reading aloud is a little more challenging than reading to yourself. But I would employ your third grader. It's going to benefit your third grader and your second grader. You're killing two birds with one stone there. History, if you chose to do science, if you just pick up books at the library, or if you have a program, there's no reason that that every other topic you do shouldn't be those two kids together. I think that it's incredibly helpful to teach your children the skill of being content and independent and alone. We all, granted, when mine were second and third grade, we always had babies, but it's not a bad thing for your second and third grader to have some time where they are alone and they're content alone, whether it's with books or a few toys. Audio books are fantastic. I know homeschooling is what I have loved homeschooling, and we've been at it close to 20 years, but I don't think you should kid yourself. It's exhausting. And so if you can budget in some time each day where you get to breathe and be an autonomous alone person, that's a good thing. And it's something that it's a good skill to teach your children to be content. It's not a bad thing, second and third grade, to give them something to work on where maybe whether it's math, it doesn't work for every student in every subject the same way, but you kind of teach them, this is the thing I want you to work on today in math. And then you do see if they can kind of do it on their own a little bit. So you're nearby, but you're kind of getting them up on their own 2 feet and showing them that there's a lot of stuff that they can do independently, even though you're there to help. You're ready, you're there to help.
No, that's great. Anybody else want to talk real quick on schedules?
Yeah, so for something like math, what often happens in our house is everyone sits down and does math in the same area, maybe the same floor or all around the kitchen table or something like that, some people on the couch. And the way our program works is that they should be able to read at the top of the page the concept being introduced. Sometimes they need me to go over that with them first. Sometimes it's not really that new. Math has a lot of repetition. So we'll all sit together. They're working independently though. And then it's kind of like in a classroom where they kind of like raise their hand or just shout out, "Mom, I need help." And I come over to that kid and look at the problem they're working on and help them work through that. And then once they can get that concept once, they can generally go to the next one, but then maybe another kid is on a different type of problem and they're saying, "Mom, how do I do this?" And I'll go over there. So for some things, they have to work through it at their own pace. Like that with something like math, they're just gonna understand those concepts at a different pace than the other kids. So sometimes I will do something like that. When they were younger and doing phonics, I had 4 kids within 4.5 years. And so when they were eating breakfast, I would sit at the table with phonics flashcards and I would hold them up. And so that they could still eat and accomplish 2 things at once, we would go around the table. So they're all hearing it, and they're all seeing it, but they're taking turns saying it. So it would be like, it would have the blend SH and they'd say "shh," like in shoe or whatever it is. And then I'd hold up the next one and the next person would say it. So we did that type of thing for things that you can review. And then we do a lot of subjects together as well, like you were saying with history and science.
Mhm.
I'll just chime in to give another schedule perspective, because I know this is probably where a lot of parents are wondering, how do I do this, especially if you have multiple kids that are close in age. And like Renee and Christine and Rhonda, I had several kids close in age for many years. And I liked when I'm making breakfast in the morning, they're doing their morning chores while I'm doing that, so I can kind of give, instructions and checking up on what they've done. And then we have breakfast. I usually try to get I do devotion while we're eating breakfast, or we watch there's a wonderful news program that's 10 minutes long. It's called World Watch. It's by World Watch. And so we're watching that every morning now. That just started this past week, but World Magazine puts that out. But anyway, so we'll do that. We'll talk about the news. Then we'll sit down and have our morning read aloud. We're doing history, we're doing literature, we maybe even talking, having a science book that we're reading through. So we start out the day together. And then I usually schedule time with each child, because each child is going to need their own math lessons. And I'm one that really firmly believes if you're going to do math well at home, you have to do math with your child every single day. Each child needs time with you every single day with math. I just feel like if we let them do too much on their own in that regard, independently, it can all of a sudden they're not progressing. So my encouragement is to schedule time with each child. Some of them need phonics, some of them need phonics, math, and and other subjects. So I have, while I'm sitting with one child doing phonics lessons and math lessons, however long that, I look and see how long I'm going to spend with that child. The other children have something that they're working on independently, whether they're doing typing on the computer program, they're doing read aloud auditory books, they're doing their own writing program, or their math independent work that they have to do problems on their own. So they have their independent work that they're working on while I'm working with each child. And everybody has a space in the schoolroom. So either they're working at their own desk or they have their own seat at the space at the table. This is my schoolroom behind me. And you may not have a schoolroom. It's okay if it's at the kitchen table. Just pretend like this is my kitchen. Anyway, so it's important, I think, to schedule time independently with each of your children so they know they have that mommy time and they can look forward to having that time with you, teaching one-on-one, but also having the others have a specific sort of a schedule for what they need to do during that time. For each child, I think is part of getting them to be independent learners and independent people, growing beyond that, childhood more into that independent living, is I give each one of them a checklist that they're working on each day, and they have to show me, they have to turn it in, or they have to show me that they've checked it off, depending on the age group. Like my youngest, he just has a a laminated page because he does the same things every day, and so he just checks that off, and then tomorrow we erase it. So it's not like in ink, it's a condemnation if he didn't do everything that day. But my other bigger kids, they're checking off their checklist, and they're showing me, having to show me that they're accountable for what they've done, and they're accountable to me for what they've accomplished in a day, that I'm not necessarily standing over them for every single thing.
Great. Okay. So thank you to everybody who's here, who's watching this as a recording. Thank you so much to the panelists. I'll bring up my panelists here. Thank you, panelists, for being here and sharing your wisdom. I know 1 hour is just not enough to show all the wisdom of your journey, but thank you for what you did share and contributing to that Google document with the questions, answers, anything that you want to pour into that. I'm going to take some notes of what you said, but a lot of what you said, if you can document that into that Google Doc, and then we'll make that available with the recording as well. So thank you, everybody, and have a great day, great school year.